It's sometimes said that the difference between creativity and innovation is that creativity is thinking while innovation is doing. Over the past 2 days, we've been on quite a journey through the formal presentations, our engaging Q&A sessions, and the powerful discussions throughout. And we've been exposed to a range of innovative ideas. I'm not sure if Michael is still in the room, but I particularly enjoyed that Qantas Jetstar example as well, and I think the need to consider redesign rather than adapt is particularly salient for us, and I do hope it's possible. The challenge now, though, is how to take this thinking and translate it into the doing, translate it into a culture of innovation. Our next speaker has a track record of doing just that. Through a career that has spanned the fields of medicine, education, politics and defence, Dr. Brendan Nelson has engaged both intellectually and at a human level to create lasting change. Among his many achievements, Dr. Nelson was Minister for Defence and most recently the head of the Australian War Memorial. Dr. Nelson is currently President of Boeing Australia, New Zealand and South Pacific. Dr. Nelson will now provide a recorded address on a culture of innovation.
Air Marshal Mel Hupfeld, Chief of the Royal Australian Air Force, military leaders from throughout the world, our political leaders, uniformed personnel, members of defence industry, ladies and gentlemen. People and leadership is what I have been asked to speak about in the context of innovation and resilience. I have worn their blood. So many of us have worn their blood. Those were the words of Wing Commander Sharon Bown, retired, reflecting on her service in Afghanistan as an Air Force nurse to the crowd assembled for the dawn service on Anzac Day at the Australian War Memorial in 2014. A decade earlier, that woman in her uniform had been pulled from the wreck of a UN Bell helicopter in East Timor, having been on her way to the aid of a woman in extremis having a baby. Per ardua astra, through adversity to the stars, the mission, the vision of the Royal Australian Air Force, so prominently displayed on the Air Force Memorial, on Anzac Parade in Canberra, the most symbolically powerful man-made vista this country has to offer. That memorial, along with others, straddles Anzac Parade. At one end across the lake is the Australian Parliament, where exercised on our behalf are our political, economic and religious freedoms. At the other end, nestled under Mount Ainslie, is the Australian War Memorial, where we reveal our character as a people, where we honour the men and women, you, who underwrite the freedoms which too often my generation has taken for granted. Behind per ardua astra, in that memorial, the aircraft, the technology are but props for people, men and women who have worn and who wear the uniform of the Royal Australian Air Force, reminding us every day that there are truths by which we live that are worth fighting to defend. A sense of history is absolutely essential to an understanding of and shaping the future. When little else in the world makes sense, history is the guiding discipline. It can break down prejudice, it can overcome fear, it can inspire, and it can also point to new directions and where we need to go. The German physicist and philosopher Bernhard Filbert wrote in Revelation, "Progress leads to chaos if not anchored in tradition. Tradition becomes rigid if it does not prepare the way for progress." but a perverted traditionalism and a misguided progressivism propel each other toward a deadly excess, hardly leaving any ground between them. And therein lies the fundamental challenge of leadership. To understand, to know and live the fundamental values of the traditionalists who made your organisation what it is, who gave it what it has, and that will be the basis upon which you will drive a new future, a better future for your organisation, and to ensure that the progressivists, which you always have around you, both understand and respect the traditions and values upon which it is based. We gather here in a time of unprecedented uncertainty. We are living through the most consequential geopolitical realignment in our lifetime. Those institutions of the global world order, built largely but not only by the United States after the Second World War, are being severely tested. Some of those instruments are failing the world that is, let alone the one that's coming. We've seen a resurgence of totalitarianism, authoritarianism being played out as we meet. We're living through a once-in-a-century global pandemic. Humankind faces an existential challenge in the form of a changing environment. We see immense global economic uncertainty, vast technological change, the militarization of space, and the Sino-American relationship and its tensions is taking us to a world that we have not lived in since the Franco-Prussian War or the Qing dynasty. As Paul Kennedy, Richard Dilworth, Professor of History at Yale, observed just over a decade ago, perhaps humankind is moving to a new age. We've not had the cataclysms of the Napoleonic Wars or the Second World War, God forbid, but nonetheless, humankind, as it did in the late 15th century, is moving now to a new age, and we are living through that. The most fragile, yet powerful of human emotions, paradoxically, is hope. We all have to believe that tomorrow is going to be better than today. Next week will be better than this. Next year will be better than this one. And what most sustains hope is men and women reaching out in support of one another, even when gripped by fear. Leaders who are able to inspire those whom they lead, to confidently believe in a better future, to never allow them to lose sight of from where they came, who gave them, as I said, what they have, and where they are going. At the heart of the Australian War Memorial is the Hall of Memory, and beneath that Byzantine-inspired dome, since 1993, has been the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. Standing silent sentinels above him are the images in stained glass windows of 15 Australians of the First World War. And at the bottom of each window is a single word. The founder, First World War official historian who saw everything from Gallipoli to Mont St. Quentin, Charles Bean, the first director, a man called John Treloar, also a veteran. They asked themselves a very important question. What they asked are the qualities, the values we saw in these men and women that we regard as being essential, not just for victory in battles, but for depth and breadth of character. Character derives from the Greek word. It means the impression left in wax by a stone seal ring. The Greeks called it the stamp of personality. Transcending everything in life, rank, power, money, intellect, talent, looks, is character, informed by worthwhile intrinsic virtues. There are depictions of two aviators amongst those 15. The first is an Air Force technician, and he's holding a clamp vise. There's an electric arc. There is a flame of invention, a sword cutting the Gordian knot. Creative and bold solutions to difficult problems. Resource to always look within yourself, within others, for every human and material resource that you might have available to you to help you achieve your objectives. On the Western side is the image of an airman of the First World War from the Australian Flying Corps, the antecedents of our Royal Australian Air Force. And above him are the accoutrements of the knights of the Middle Ages. And the word at his feet is chivalry, because seen in those airmen were the chivalric codes of medieval knights, of courage. We often speak of courage, but it's that spirit that challenges doubt in us. It allows us to impose will. It protects your integrity, advances values, and ultimately allows you to break through fear, moral courage, physical courage. Honour, integrity, courtesy, a sense of justice, knowing right from wrong, and the importance of knowing. And Napier Waller, the muralist who did those stained glass windows, he said of those airmen, the single most important one was the willingness, the preparedness to help other human beings, irrespective of the risk to yourself. Beyond those headlines, broad brushstrokes and popular images and perhaps mythology are individual stories of courage, of devotion to duty and to our country. This year we will mark the 80th anniversary of one of the most courageous acts ever by a man wearing the uniform of the Royal Australian Air Force. On the 29th of November 1942, Pilot Officer Rawdon Hume Middleton, a 26-year-old Australian, was piloting a Sterling bomber from 149 Squadron. It was his 29th mission. The target was the aircraft factory, the Fiat factory at Turin. They struggled over the French Alps, very, very heavy flak over the bomb site. On their third attempt to come into the bomb site and discharge their load, flak hit the cabin of the aircraft. 3 were wounded: the wireless operator, the co-pilot, and Rawdon Middleton. He was grievously wounded. Shrapnel wounds to his arms, body, and legs. His jaw was shattered. The right eye was blown from its socket. He passed out. The aircraft was in a death dive when the co-pilot was resuscitated by one of the crew and started to try to get control of it. Middleton regained consciousness and, though bleeding out, helped level the aircraft at 800 feet. He then said to his crew, "I promise you, I will get you back to England." They took more flak across France, and 4 hours later they saw the English coast with less than 5 minutes of fuel left. The crew begged Middleton to attempt a crash landing. He regarded the risk to civilians as being too great. Instead, he levelled the aircraft alongside the English coast and at Dymchurch ordered the crew to bail out. 5 of them did. 2, the flight engineer and the forward gunner, refused to do so. He then turned the aircraft to sea. The other 2 crew members bailed out, but did not survive the night in the English Channel. And then Rawdon's body was washed up 2 months later on the English coast. The citation for his Victoria Cross: only 101 Australians have ever been so awarded. His citation says, in part, his devotion to duty is not surpassed in the annals of the Royal Air Force. If you go to Lincolnshire in England to the International Bomber Command Centre, as you walk from the interpretive centre along the path to the large steel spire, the height of which equates to the wingspan of a 4-engined Avro Lancaster bomber. Around concentric circles which form around that spire are inscribed the names of 55,000 British and Commonwealth airmen who died in Bomber Command in the Second World War, including 3,486 Australians. The very last memorial plaque you will see is a large piece of stone, and at the bottom of it are inscribed the words of a 20-year-old Australian pilot, Colin Flockhart, who was killed in M for Mike 619 Squadron on the 7th of January 1945. The words come from a letter that he wrote to his family 3 weeks earlier in the event of his death. He says, "I have always been proud to wear my uniform and striven to do my best for the service as a whole. Cheerio, keep smiling, though your hearts are breaking." A century on after the formation of the Royal Australian Air Force, its leadership today is manifesting resilience and innovation. Boeing in Australia in 2016 conceived the idea of an AI-powered, autonomous air-powered teaming system, an attritable capability with 5th generation flight and design characteristics with a modular payload. The Royal Australian Air Force made the decision, a courageous decision, to co-invest in the project, not just politically, but financially. Less than 4 years after conception, it has been designed, built, and flown in Australia by Australians, with more than 70% of the content being Australian made and delivered. An aircraft now flying, which is also for export to like-minded countries. But it's not just the technology, it is the way that we need to increasingly approach the acquisition of technology and material and platforms in a rapidly deteriorating threat environment. We can no longer simply give shopping lists to defence industry and tell them that's what we want to acquire. We need also, as we've done with Loyal Wingman, to co-invest in the rapid development of capability and in doing so take that risk. Leadership, in my experience, is not something that can be taught, but it can be learned. And it's learned through observation of, reflection upon, and adoption of the leadership qualities that we see in others. And the power is in the story. Whether it's Wing Commander Sharon Bowen, whether it's Rawdon Middleton VC, or a 20-year-old Colin Flockhart. Different kinds of leadership. Good leaders are at ease with themselves. There's no sense of self-aggrandisement. They're motivated clearly by a sense of public duty to do the right thing. Clear-minded, ethical, and decisive. What differentiates leadership from management is vision. Management's about day-to-day, week-to-week decisions, emptying an in-tray and inbox, managing people. But leadership is informed by vision, a comprehensive sense of who we are, where we come from, where we want to go, why we want to get there, and what we're all going to have to do to deliver that outcome. Amongst the many qualities, it includes making other people feel a reverence for themselves. As Defence Minister, I remember getting in the back of a C-130 Hercules and a young man in an Air Force disrupted cams. He said, "Oh, I'm just a loadmaster." I said, there is no such thing as just a loadmaster. Every single person, including you, is responsible for the safety of the men and women on this aircraft, the delivery of the mission outcome. It doesn't matter where you fit. Every person has something to contribute, and no one has a monopoly on innovative and creative ideas also. It's essential to have an open mind, a mind that is open to the unfamiliar, people that are different, ideas that are different, and to build a successful environment to surround yourselves with people that are questioning your own thinking. The second thing is to nurture and protect the inner integrity of your own intellect, your ability to think, to articulate ideas, to challenge and change the attitudes of others, to be interested in and interesting to the rest of the world. Too often, in any field of endeavour, people will look through a straw with immense expertise, but completely oblivious to the context and the broader environment in which they are undertaking their work. The third thing that's essential is character. As I said earlier, it's what makes and breaks people. The fourth thing that's important is to be imbued with the imaginative capacity to see the world through the eyes of others. Almost all of life's suffering, misery and pain comes from people who make themselves the centre of their own lives. And so too, that is the case with nations. Understanding what people think is important, of course it is. But what's much more important is understanding how they think. And finally, in the end, in leadership, you'll be remembered not for what you are, but who you are, the way you treat others. And I know the military has a hierarchy, a chain of command. But as the great 17th century Prussian philosopher Immanuel Kant observed, every human being is an end unto himself, not a means to be used by others. Respect for your own humanity will be found in respect for the humanity of others, and morality is freedom. To do the right thing to others and for others is freedom. Per ardua astra, through adversity to the stars. Thank you.